So this is just to review the basic principles about where we were going to position a cleat on a cycling shoe. As a good starting point, set up nice and neutral, just try and keep it uncomplicated is the best principle to start with, I find. So it can be pretty variable as to where the holes are actually drilled in the bottom of different makes of shoe. This is like a standard Shimano cleat on a Giro shoe, and generally with Giro the holes are drilled a little bit further back potentially, but and this is not to replace perhaps looking in more in depth as to what might be involved in a bike fit if you've got any particular issues, but in terms of just setting your cleats up nice and symmetrically, getting them set in a supportive manner underneath your foot it's a good place to start, especially if you don't know where or have any idea where this needs to go when you're putting it onto your shoe maybe for the first time, or you're using clipless pedals. So essentially the main components that we need to work about where you've got the most adjustment is going to be the fore-aft position of the cleat on the pedal, and also rotationally. You've also got different amounts of float within the cleat itself, and how that's going to help you almost give you some degrees of freedom when your foot is clipped into the pedal. So the basic principles that we like to follow in terms of getting the foot nicely supported and making it feel like there's some even pressure when your foot is clipped onto the pedal is generally to move the cleat as far back as it needs to go on the shoe. And often the middle of the pedal spindle will actually be a little bit further back than maybe traditional bike fitting methodology is suggested, where they've been trying to put the pedal spindle directly underneath the first metatarsal joint at the base of the big toe. Generally, it usually ends up being a little bit more comfortable if you get it a little bit further back than that, which will usually mean moving the cleat further back on the shoe, and therefore the foot goes slightly further forwards on the pedal. If you've got quite a mobile or high arched type foot, sometimes you may need a footbed inside your shoe, but in terms of just weight distribution and pressure on the foot itself, moving the cleat further back will be generally a little bit more comfortable, especially if you end up or complain of getting pins and needles or numbness underneath the forefoot. So if you move the cleat as far back as it goes on the shoe, and then possibly just nip one of the bolts up, so you can still move it a little bit rotationally. In terms of what you want to try and do is naturally sort of accommodate the way that your foot is while you're standing. So if you stand where your toe is usually turned out relative to your heels, like most people do, you may need to accommodate that slightly with the rotation of the cleat itself on the bottom of the shoe. But to start with, try and set it neutral, in other words, where the foot is going to be perpendicular and straight in the pedal, and then the float within the pedal system itself will allow you to move where you need to go. So in order to do that, the simplest way of doing it is just to find a level surface and simply place the shoe on a level surface, and you can actually just see when the cleat is resting there, you can see easily what the orientation of the shoe is going to be. So if you needed to accommodate a little bit of rotation, you can turn the cleat a little bit so that it's a little bit more toe out, and then again you can just check where it needs to go in that respect. So this is something you can kind of go backwards and forwards with a little bit based on how it feels when you're clipped into the pedals. So once you're happy that you've got that set nice and neutral, start with it straight, and then if you need to move from there, then you can kind of tweak it slightly, but just try it after you've clipped into the pedal. If you don't want to feel like you're up against the end of the float, so you should feel like you're fairly centered while you're actually pedaling on the bike. And then just nip up the other bolts so that they're tight, and then just check again to see that that is sitting nice and straight. If you find that you're moving the cleats a long way, in other words, if they've been all the way forwards and they're all the way back, you may have to compensate slightly with your saddle height and actually lower it a few millimeters to accommodate for the cleat coming back, because it's almost like raising the saddle height a little bit because your foot's going further forwards. So give that a try. If you want to come in and get checked, then give us a shout at Physio House.